It all started with a buzz. An unpleasant, persistent drone, like some mutant mosquito from a science fiction movie, was hovering right by my ear. I was on my knees in my garden, pruning the Queen Elizabeth roses, the only thing my late husband, David, loved more than Sunday golf. The early summer air in North Carolina was thick and sweet, smelling of damp earth and honeysuckle. At 72, the ritual of gardening wasn't just a hobby, it was an anchor, holding me to the real world. I knew every thorn, every vein on every leaf. But this buzz was foreign. I looked up, shielding my eyes from the sun. Directly above me, maybe 20 feet up, a drone was hovering. It was glossy black, with 4 propellers, like a predatory insect. The blue light of its camera was aimed squarely at me. It wasn't just passing by. It was hovering, studying. The cold, impersonal gaze of technology in my small, hand-tended world. I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the heat. This was an invasion. Not like a neighbor's ball flying over the fence, but something else, methodical, calculating. As if someone wasn't just looking, but assessing. The house. The yard. Me. I froze, my garden shears clutched in my hand. The seconds stretched on. I wanted to shout, to wave my arms, but I just stared at that blue eye, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the drone shot upward and zipped away silently toward the new, sprawling McMansions that had replaced the old oak grove. The buzzing stopped. But the silence that returned was different. It had a crack in it. An anomaly that my brain could neither explain nor ignore. I was alone again among my roses, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I forced myself back to work, trying to rationalize it as a real estate agent filming the neighborhood or some teenager with a new toy. But the feeling was too personal. This house, 125 Gable Street, was my fortress. David and I bought it nearly half a century ago. I remember standing on this very spot, which was then just bare earth marked out with the footprint of a foundation. "This is where our son will grow up, Carolyn," David had said. And he was right. Our Kevin grew up in this house. I taught him to ride his bike on this very lawn, running behind him, holding the seat, promising I wouldn't let go. And then I did, and he was riding on his own, looking back at me with a mix of triumph and disbelief. He always trusted me. Even as a teenager, when he got into trouble with his friends, he came to me, not his father. I was always his safe harbor. I saw the best parts of David in him, his intelligence, his ambition, but without his father's hard edge. Maybe that was my mistake. I softened too many of his falls, laid down pillows where he perhaps needed to learn the sting of the pavement. After college, he drifted through 3 jobs in 5 years, each time insisting it wasn't the right fit, that he was searching for his true calling. I supported him, believing his generation was simply different. They sought meaning, not just stability. Etheria, his startup, seemed to be the culmination of that search. He'd finally found something that set him on fire. And I was ready to do anything to help that fire grow. The phone rang as soon as I walked inside. The screen read, "Kevin." I smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hey, Mom. How are you? Is now a good time?" His voice was tired, but charged with an enthusiasm I'd come to recognize as his startup voice. "Of course. Just puttering in the garden." "How are things at Etheria?" "Moving, Mom, really moving. And Chloe is a lifesaver. I'd be lost without her. She's putting together a new pitch deck for investors. She's a genius." Chloe, his girlfriend. She was bright, like a flashbulb. When Kevin first brought her over, she had me charmed within 5 minutes. Smart, quick, with a perfect smile and a gaze that seemed to see right through you. She'd worked in marketing and, according to Kevin, had quit her high-paying job to help him get the startup off the ground. "She believes in me, Mom," he had told me, his voice so full of happiness it melted my heart. "Listen, Mom, quick question, just for the records. Remember that big leather binder Dad kept in his study with all the house documents? The deed, old insurance papers, that stuff. Is it still in his desk? Top drawer, I think." The question was so mundane, so trivial, that I answered without a second thought. "Yes, of course, honey. It's all right where he left it." For a split second, a thought flickered. Why does he need that? But I dismissed it just as quickly. Don't be paranoid, Carolyn. He's your son. He's probably just putting together a personal financial statement. Great, thanks. Just needed to confirm for the archive. Okay, Mom, I've gotta run. Love you. I love you too, sweetie. I hung up, a slight, almost imperceptible unease settling over me before dissolving into the warmth of maternal pride. A couple of days later, Chloe called me. It was unexpected. We usually only spoke when she and Kevin visited together. Carolyn, hello, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Her voice was melodic and solicitous. I have a delicate question. I want to get Kevin a special surprise for his birthday. You know him better than anyone. What's something he would truly love? I was touched. We chatted for 20 minutes. I told her about his childhood fascination with model airplanes, his love for old science fiction movies. She listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. Then the conversation smoothly shifted gears. He works so hard, she sighed. Sometimes I think he carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. He worries about you, you know? About you being alone in such a big house. He's so protective of you. He's a good son, I said simply. The best, Chloe confirmed with passion. He mentioned once how you and David set things up so wisely that you're financially secure. It's such a relief for him, you have no idea. It lets him focus completely on the project, knowing his mom is safe. The conversation felt so natural, so caring. I didn't even realize I was being interviewed until after I'd hung up, having confirmed that yes, the house was paid off and yes, I was perfectly fine on my own. It left a strange aftertaste, as if I'd passed a test I hadn't known I was taking. That Saturday, Kevin and Chloe came for dinner. Kevin was all business, rattling off terms like seed round, bridge financing, and scalability. I saw the tension in his shoulders. I brought out my signature apple pie, and Chloe clapped her hands in delight. Carolyn, this house is just a treasure, she said, her eyes scanning the room. It has such wonderful energy. You know, I was just thinking, interest rates for business loans are astronomical right now. But leveraging real estate, that's a whole different ballgame. An asset like this is a goldmine. She said it lightly, casually, as she cut a slice of pie. Kevin tensed, shooting her a sharp glance. Chloe, what, honey? I'm just thinking out loud, she said, giving me her most disarming smile. I'm a marketer. I'm always thinking about assets. Of course, we would never risk your mother's house. Ever. No, Mom. Absolutely not, Kevin said, looking me straight in the eye. My problems are my problems. We'll handle it. His words were meant to reassure me, and they did. I saw my principled, proud boy. I even felt a flicker of gratitude toward Chloe for bringing it up so transparently, allowing Kevin to shut it down so firmly. A week later, Kevin stopped by again. He was alone this time, looking exhausted but electric. Mom, you have to save me, he said from the doorway. I have a meeting with the lead investor, the one from California, in an hour, and the printer at our office just died. I need to print and sign a few pages of the agreement. Can I use your study? It'll take 10 minutes. Good heavens, Kevin, of course. Don't be silly. I led him to David's small study. While he was in there, I went to the kitchen to make him coffee. I could hear the printer whirring, spitting out pages. I heard the click of his pen. There was nothing unusual about it. This was just life. A mother helping her son. 15 minutes later, he came out holding a neat stack of papers. Mom, you're a lifesaver, he said, downing the coffee in one gulp. This could be the day that changes everything. Wish me luck. He gave me a tight hug, the kind he used to give me as a boy. My heart swelled with love and pride. Good luck, my boy. I know you'll be wonderful. He left, and I stood at the window, watching him go. That evening, as I was tidying up, I went into David's study to turn off the computer. By the printer was a small wastebasket. On top lay a crumpled piece of paper. My neat freak instincts made me pick it up to take to the main trash can in the kitchen. But something made me pause. I smoothed it out. It was clearly a misprint. Part of the page was smeared with ink, the text printed at an angle. But some words and phrases were perfectly clear. In accordance with the laws of the state of North Carolina, quitclaim deed, full authority to execute transactions on behalf of the grantor, and at the very bottom of the page, beneath the signature line, a name was typed. My name, Carolyn Reed. I stood in the silence of my late husband's study, a coldness that had nothing to do with the room's temperature seeping up from the floor. What was this? Why were these words in a document for an investor? Quitclaim deed. My brain refused to connect these words to my son, to his hug, to his promise that he would never ask me for a cent. It's a mistake. A stupid mistake. It must be some kind of template he downloaded. I crumpled the paper again, more forcefully this time, and tossed it back into the basket. I made myself walk out and turn off the light. But as I walked down the dark hallway, the echo of those words, quitclaim deed, followed me. The crack in the silence that had appeared in my garden a week ago had begun to splinter, threatening to shatter the foundation of my entire world. And for the first time in my life, I felt a real, sickening fear of what was to come. Sleep offered no escape. I tossed and turned. The image of that crumpled paper burned into my mind. Quitclaim deed. The words, devoid of context, were like poison seeds planted in the fertile soil of my fear. I tried to reason with myself, to believe it was just legal boilerplate, a template that meant nothing. But the flimsy hope frayed with every passing hour in the suffocating darkness of my bedroom. Around 3 a.m, I gave up. I went downstairs. The silence of the house was oppressive. My hands trembled so much that I nearly dropped the glass of water I poured for myself. The dread of not knowing was worse than any truth, no matter how terrible. I had to know. I had to either confirm that I was a paranoid old woman or I had to look the monster in the eye. I went back into David's study, sat in his big leather chair, and turned on the computer. The screen illuminated my pale face. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was a point of no return, and I knew it. But I couldn't remain in this suffocating fog of suspicion. Slowly, letter by letter, I typed Wake County Register of Deeds into the search bar. I navigated to the official website and found the real estate records search. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I entered my address, 125 Gable Street. The page loaded. A standard table of information, assessed value, tax history, lot size. I was about to exhale in relief, ready to chastise myself for my panic. But then my eyes caught it, a small, red-flagged line at the top of the page that I'd never seen before. Recent activity on this property. I clicked it. A link to a PDF file appeared. The file name was a string of numbers and 3 words, quitclaim deed. Time stopped. I clicked the link. The document opened. Official, stamped with the state seal. I forced myself to read. Every word was a nail being hammered into the coffin of my world. Grantor, Carolyn Reed. Grantee, Etheria Innovations, LLC. A filing date. And at the bottom, a seal. The blue, circular seal of a North Carolina notary public. And a name, Jason Hargrove. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't a mistake. It was a fact. A legally binding document. A piece of paper that weighed more than half a century of my life. A wave of nausea washed over me. I leaned back in the chair as the room tilted, the cold dread solidifying into the horrifying certainty of betrayal. It wasn't just a theft. It was an erasure. As if my son had taken an eraser and simply wiped me away from the only place on earth I called home. I sat there in the dark in a house that was no longer mine, feeling the cold seep not just into my bones, but into my very soul. The next day passed in a daze. I wandered through the rooms like a ghost. I picked up the small, framed clay impression of Kevin's handprint he'd made in kindergarten for Mother's Day. I traced the innocent lines of his tiny palm. Who was the person who had left this print? And who was the other one, the one who had signed his name on a stolen document? Could they possibly be the same? I sat in the armchair, clutching the frame, and closed my eyes. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Kevin was 9. David had bought him a fancy telescope, and the 3 of us took it into the backyard late one night. David, so serious and methodical, was explaining the constellations while Kevin, his eyes wide with wonder, tried to find Saturn. I can't see it, Dad, he'd complained. David had knelt beside him. Sometimes, to see something important, you can't just look, you have to know where to look. And you have to be patient. He adjusted the scope, and a moment later, Kevin's shriek of joy cut through the night. I see it. I see the rings. Mom, come look. I peered into the eyepiece and gasped. The tiny, perfect planet suspended in the blackness. It felt like magic. Later, as David was carrying a sleepy Kevin back inside, he turned to me and said, "The important thing is that he always keeps looking at the stars, Carrie. So he doesn't get lost in the mud at his feet." I opened my eyes, tears streaming down my cheeks. David was gone, and his son hadn't just gotten lost in the mud, he had become the mud. He had traded the stars for a stack of papers. The memory, once a source of warmth, now burned with an unbearable pain. He had stolen that, too. He had turned my entire past into the set dressing for his crime. By evening, I forced myself to call him. Not to scream, not to cry, but to listen. To hear it from him, so there would be no doubt left. Chloe's laughter echoed in the background when he answered. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" "Kevin." My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I saw the official document on the county website, with the notary's seal. There was a brief pause. "Oh, that," he said, his tone full of a weary condescension. "Mom, I told you not to worry about it. It's just a formality." "You forged my signature, Kevin." "I didn't forge anything," he snapped. "We talked about it, Mom. You said you wanted to help. You were right there in the room. The lawyers call it implied consent. Maybe you just forgot? You've been so forgetful lately." The blow was surgically precise. He wasn't just lying, he was trying to dismantle my reality. "I'm not forgetful, Kevin. I remember perfectly well that I signed nothing." "Who is Jason Hargrove?" "He's the notary, obviously," he shot back. "He notarized it. It's all legal. But I've never met him." "Mom, look," he sighed, shifting his tone to one of a parent placating a difficult child. "You're turning a technicality into some Shakespearean tragedy. Don't you want me to succeed? This house is my future, too. It's our family's primary asset. Or do you just want it to sit here until you—" He trailed off, but I heard the unspoken words. "Until you die." "So that's how you see it," I whispered. "I'm just an obstacle in the way of the family asset." "I didn't say that." "You're twisting my words," he said, his voice rising in anger. "You know what? Let's talk when you've calmed down. You're not in the right frame of mind for a constructive conversation. I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, stunned. He had built a wall between us. A wall of lies, manipulation, and contempt. And I knew I could never break through it. The person on the other side was no longer my son. After that call, I broke. I drew the curtains and unplugged the phone. In the supermarket, I ran into my neighbor, Martha. "Carolyn, dear, how are you?" "I feel like I haven't seen you in ages," she chirped. "Just a bit of a cold, Martha. I'm fine," I lied, unable to meet her eyes. I felt like the word fool was branded on my forehead. I fled the store in shame. At home, I searched for lawyers online. Miller, Holt and Associates. Property law. $15,000 minimum retainer. The Legacy Law Group. Consultations at $500 per hour. The numbers mocked me. The system was built to protect them, the ones with money for lawyers who could twist words into weapons. Despair was a thick, viscous bog, sucking me under. The days passed in a dim, silent haze. Then one morning, sorting through David's desk, I found my old high school transcript. I opened it and saw my graduation photo, a serious girl with a determined chin. I read the comment from my homeroom teacher, "Carolyn is a quiet and thoughtful student. She is not always the first to raise her hand, but she possesses a remarkable resilience." Resilience. The word was like a switch being flipped in a dark room. I remembered the girl in that photo. I remembered working 2 shifts at a diner when we almost lost this house in the recession of the 80s. I remembered holding David's hand through his final, painful months. I was never a fighter. I was a survivor. The one who grits her teeth and just keeps going. And in that moment, the despair began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Anger at them for daring to think I was a feeble old woman. And anger at myself for almost believing them. I looked at my reflection. I saw wrinkles and gray hair. But behind them, I saw the woman who hadn't given up then. And I made a promise to her, they would not get this house. My first step was guided by 40 years of teaching experience. When you don't know something, you go to the library. I sat at a public computer for 8 hours until closing time. I searched for quitclaim deed fraud, forged signature real estate, notary liability, North Carolina. I read legal articles, statutes, and precedents. But the most helpful resource was an online forum for victims of elder financial abuse. One woman wrote, "My brother had our sick mother sign over her house. He told her it was insurance paperwork." These people's greatest weapon is our trust. Their greatest weakness is their arrogance. They always leave a paper trail because they don't believe we'll ever look for it. Those words became my mantra. They always leave a paper trail. I understood their mistake. They had focused on the psychological game, on making me doubt myself, but they had been sloppy with the paperwork. They had underestimated a retired teacher with a library card. The key was the notary, Jason Hargrove. By law, he was required to personally verify my identity, witness my signature, and log the event in his journal. None of that happened, which meant he was either a criminal accomplice or he had been duped. Perhaps Chloe had hired an actress to impersonate me. It seemed more her style, daring, theatrical, and keeping Kevin's hands clean. My plan began to form. I didn't need a lawyer yet. I needed evidence. I needed to talk to the notary. Not to accuse, but to inquire. To catch him off guard. I was no longer a victim mourning a loss. I was an investigator. I bought a fresh notebook from the drugstore. On the first page, I wrote, Case file number 1, Carolyn Reed v. The future. Back home, I found Jason Hargrove's business information online. He had a small office and a cell number for mobile notary services. My heart pounded as I picked up the phone. This was it. The Rubicon. After this call, there was no going back. I would be formally acknowledging my son as a criminal, starting a process that could end with him in prison. Could I do it? I looked at the photo of David on the mantel. You've got more steel in you than you think, Carrie. I took a deep breath and dialed. It rang twice. I almost hoped he wouldn't answer. Yellow. Jason Hargrove. Ahem. Hargrove speaking. A man's voice answered, sounding like he'd just choked on a sip of coffee. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. Mr. Hargrove, I said, my voice surprisingly steady and calm. My name is Carolyn Reed. A few days ago, you notarized a document bearing my signature. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about it. A heavy, ringing silence hung on the other end of the line. I could hear the man's uneven breathing. I didn't rush him. I let the silence do its work. Carolyn Reed, he finally said. His voice was tight with the first notes of panic. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. I think you do, I replied, my tone still placid, as if I were discussing a student's grades. It's a quitclaim deed for the property at 125, Gable Street. You notarized it last week. The thing is, Mr. Hargrove, I've never met you. And I never signed it. So I'm calling you before I call the Secretary of State's office and the police. I thought you might want to give me your version of events first. I was bluffing. I wasn't ready to call the police. But he didn't know that. I heard him swallow hard. Listen, ma'am, there must be some mistake. A mistake? Perhaps. But for a mistake like this, you could lose your license and face felony fraud charges. I just want to know who came to your office claiming to be me. Describe the woman to me. Another pause, this one different. It was the sound of a man frantically weighing his options. When he finally spoke, his voice was a strangled whisper. She was younger than I expected. Dark hair, very polished. She said you were her mother, that you were unwell, and had asked her to handle the paperwork. She had everything, a power of attorney, your driver's license. My driver's license has been in my wallet all week, Mr. Hargrove. Then it was a fake, he breathed. Oh, God. I'm screwed. Yes, I said simply. But you may have a chance to mitigate the damage. I will need your sworn affidavit. A statement confirming that I was not the woman you saw. Are you prepared to meet with me? Yes. Yes, of course. Wherever, whenever, he stammered, desperate. I had my first piece of evidence. It was a small victory, but it was real. I hung up, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. They had left a trail. And I had found it. With a witness, I could go to a lawyer. But I knew it would be a long, expensive, and ugly process that would drag my family's name through the mud and likely send Kevin to prison. For all my fury, I wasn't sure I wanted that. Was there another way? A way I could get my house back without utterly destroying my son? I realized my target wasn't Kevin. He was a weak, foolish instrument. My real target was the puppeteer. Chloe. I had to prove she was the architect. For that, I didn't need a subpoena. I needed a trap. The plan I devised over the next few days was risky. It required me to become an actress, to play the part they had assigned me, the naive, broken old woman. I would use their arrogance as a weapon against them. Their greatest weapon had been my trust. Mine would be their condescension. I knew my son. His ego, his cowardice, his desperate need to appear successful in Chloe's eyes. I rehearsed my lines, my tone of voice. My home would not be a courtroom. It would be an interrogation room. And I would be the only one asking the questions. I called Kevin. I let my voice tremble, amplifying the genuine tremor that was already there. Kevin, honey, it's me, I sobbed. Mom? What's wrong? His voice was wary. I'm so sorry I reacted that way. I was just scared. I'm an old woman, I don't understand all these business papers. I don't want to fight with you. You're all I have. I could hear him processing this. I knew he didn't believe in my remorse, but he would absolutely believe in my weakness. It's okay, Mom. I told you, you were just overwrought. Could you and Chloe come over? I asked. Just explain it all to me again. Slowly. Chloe is so smart, I'm sure she can make an old fool like me understand. I'll bake your favorite apple pie. It was the perfect bait, flattery for Chloe and an appeal to his childhood. After a brief hesitation, he agreed. Okay, Mom. We'll come by on Saturday. I hung up. The trap was set. On Saturday morning, I baked the pie. The scent of cinnamon and apples filled the house, creating a perfect illusion of warmth and normalcy. Half an hour before they were due to arrive, I turned on the voice recorder on my old smartphone and placed it on the bookshelf in the living room, tucked behind a stack of books. The quality would be poor, but it would be enough. They arrived, Chloe beaming and holding a bouquet of flowers. A prop. Kevin looked tense. We can't stay long, Mom, he said, avoiding my gaze. Of course, dear. Come in, sit down. We sat in the living room. The air was thick with unspoken words. Carolyn, we were so glad to hear you're feeling more yourself, Chloe began in her honey-sweet voice. Kevin and I were so worried. Thank you, dear, I said with a feeble smile. I was just confused. For instance, I spoke to that notary, Jason Hargrove. I saw Chloe freeze, her smile tightening. Kevin went pale. Why would you call him? Chloe asked, her voice sharp. Well, to make sure everything was all right, of course. He said a woman came to him, pretending to be me. Said she was my daughter. I thought, maybe it was you, Chloe? Helping Kevin with the paperwork. The question was delivered with perfect innocence. What? Of course not, she scoffed. Why would I do something like that? The man must be confused. Perhaps, I said, turning my gaze to Kevin. Kevin, look at me. Your father always said a man's name is all he has. He would have been proud of your ambition, but he never would have stood for dishonesty. What would your father say if he were here right now? I had struck the nerve, his love and fear for his father. I saw his face crumble. He opened his mouth to speak, and Chloe exploded. She knew she was losing control. What does it matter what your dead husband would have said? She shrieked, her beautiful face contorting with rage. His outdated principles don't apply. We're building a future. And you and this house are just an anchor, dragging him to the bottom. Yes, I found a woman. Yes, I had fake documents made. Because someone had to do it. He never would have had the guts. He's too weak, too much of a mama's boy to take what's rightfully his. She whirled on Kevin, who had shrunk into the cushions. "What are you going to do now? Cry to mommy? You're pathetic." Every word was a bullet aimed at my son. But they flew past him and straight into the tiny microphone on my phone. It wasn't just a confession. It was a manifesto. I slowly stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and picked up the phone. I pressed stop. The click was as loud as a gunshot in the sudden silence. I turned to face them. Chloe stared at the phone, the color draining from her face. She understood. "I believe this will be sufficient," I said quietly. The balance of power in the room had shifted entirely. The resolution was swift and private. No police. I didn't want my only son in prison, no matter what he had done. But I wasn't forgiving him either. 2 days later, in the presence of my new lawyer, an older woman who'd taken my case pro bono after hearing my story, a new set of documents was signed. The first was a quitclaim deed, transferring the property from Etheria Innovations back to me. The second placed the house into an irrevocable trust. It would be mine for the rest of my days, and no one, not even me, could sell it or borrow against it. After I'm gone, it will pass to Kevin, but only under strict conditions. The third condition was that Kevin sever all personal and business ties with Chloe, effective immediately. The recording of her confession remained in my possession, a guarantee of her compliance. She vanished from his life that same afternoon. The fourth was that Kevin attend therapy at his own expense. 6 months have passed. The autumn has painted the maple trees in my garden in hues of crimson and gold. The house is my sanctuary again. My relationship with Kevin is not repaired. We don't pretend nothing happened. He calls once a week. His voice is quiet, stripped of its former bravado. We talk about the weather, about the news. We both know that the crystal vase of our love was shattered, and it can never be truly whole again. We can only carefully pick up the pieces so as not to cut ourselves. Sometimes I think about what happened. There were no winners. I won back my house, but I lost the boy who once looked at the stars. But I found something else. I found myself. The woman from the high school transcript. The one with remarkable resilience. Betrayal burned my old world to the ground, but something new grew from the ashes. Something hard, like steel. I prune my roses, and my heart is calm. I know that no matter what storms come, this house and I will stand.